After creating 10,000 YouTube videos, I can confidently tell you I have my top 10. And one of those first videos, I think it was actually number 42 or 43, certainly in the first 100, was my original conversation with Greg Dickerson, where we talked about his story of going from a truck and a toolbox to $30 million. Yes, folks, if you remember Greg's story, it basically is high school graduate, served in the military, came back to work in the restaurants, and then went out on his own. Very inspiring story. I hope you enjoy it. Always a good time when we get to talk to Mr. Greg Dickerson. Have fun, take care, enjoy the show. Paint the vision of the end, when you sold the company, right? What you had, how many employees and what were you doing? And then the timeline, right? Year one to the end. Was it 6 or 7 years?
Yeah, it was a 7-year process. Yeah. First year in sales, I did about 250,000. Next year was like, 500, then 750, then 1.2, then 15, then 20, and then 30, something like that.
Right.
And it went from just a little handyman business, small remodeling handyman business, to a home building company, to one of the largest builders and developers as far as that business went.
Yeah.
The construction company that I created. And it started with an idea. Literally, here's how it started. I bought a house and I was trying to get some projects done on it in a new area that we'd just moved to. Nobody would return your call. Nobody would show up. So where there's a problem, there's an opportunity. And I started talking to my neighbors, and they're like, oh yeah, you can't get anybody right now. Everybody's so busy. They literally go home, answer the phone, and whoever's on the line, that's the next job they go to. And like nobody would show up. So they said, look, if you will just show up and do what you say you're going to do, you'll be successful. So I literally put on my first business card, I will call you back. I will show up. I will. Yeah. And, that I don't remember.
Great marketing slogan.
Yeah. That was my slogan. I will return your call. I will show up. And so that's what I did. And that's me. Like I'm follow through, instant. I have no backlog in my life. I take care of everything. People are shocked at how quick I respond and get to them. My clients and stuff, they're like, man, I didn't think you'd respond so fast. I'm like, that's what I do. That's how you become successful. Yeah. Successful people get things done. And so anyways, started out, with the idea of, man, I'm handy. I have a truck. I've got some tools. I had a couple little side businesses along the way before this time. So this was 1997. Prior to that, I was in the Navy, 84, 85, got out of the Navy. And I did construction work and I worked in restaurants. So I understood business. I studied retail in the Navy and did retail in the Navy. So I understood business and accounting and how to be organized and keep the books and things like that. And then I developed some skills with my tools by doing stuff around, the house that I owned, and then doing side projects for other people, building fences, building decks, finishing rooms over the garage, did that for a family member. So I learned along the way. I didn't know how to do any of these things. I went to Home Depot back in the day and I'd buy the book.
Exactly.
Do this. Because there was no Google, back
no
then.
YouTube.
You go back to an auto mechanic, the old Chilton's guides, on how to fix something. So that's how I learned. I learned by reading it in the books. And then when Google came along, man, it was a blessing and a curse because then all my customers were like, well, I Googled this and this should only cost that. And I'm like, well, they don't include it anyways. So, started that business, and it was an idea. Okay. So first becomes the idea. So you think it, you speak it, you do it, and that's your life. That's how it works. And if anybody watching, if you think about whatever you have in your life right now, whatever you're living, barring something like your child with cancer. I'm talking about business.
Yes.
If there's anything you're doing in your life, you've thought about it first, then you started talking about it, and then you went and did it.
Yeah.
That's how it works. That's how success proceeds. It's an idea, faith in it, then the means to implement it. And, so that's what I did. I started thinking, man, I could do this, this, and this. I had no clue how to do it.
Yeah.
So I said, well, the first thing I need is a name. So I came up with a name that made me sound like I was in the area forever, Outer Banks Construction. It was the Outer Banks of North Carolina. So I sounded like I'd been there forever. I couldn't believe nobody had the name.
Yeah, nobody had
I went and registered it with the courthouse, and then I was just a sole proprietor initially, and I bought a little book from the office store so I could keep my books, and keep a ledger, bought a little invoice tablet and an estimate tablet. So, I could handwrite you. I'd show up, Michael, here you go. I'm gonna write you an estimate right there. At the end, you pay me, that's your invoice, and then I recorded all that, and I had a little, briefcase that I kept my job files in, and it was just me, my truck, and my tools, and I had a little cell phone. And
they weren't little back then.
yeah, they were pretty good size, and then mobile installs and pagers and all that.
Yeah, that's funny.
So so that's how it started. I said, well, if people are that busy, then there's an opportunity, and created that little company. It was just me, and I started getting busier and busier, and then I hired my first person to help me in the field, and then I hired another one, and then that enabled me to come out of the day-to-day, and I would run materials, and I would go do sales calls, and then my next move was hiring a part-time office manager. And so she handled all the books part-time initially, and then she went full-time. And that put me in a position. Once she went full-time, I had a crew in the field with a leader that would go get all the materials and stuff. That put me in a position to just run the roads all day long,
right?
Doing sales appointments. So I would, the beach was linear, north to south. Basically, it was a little strip of sand off the coast of North Carolina. So I'd start out with my sales calls, and whichever way they were, I'd go from south to north or north to south, just showing up, and I would write you an estimate right there on the spot. And if you wanted the work done, you had to pay a deposit right then and there. Otherwise, next, And we qualified every appointment on the phone and say, look, Greg will show up, he'll give you an estimate. If you want the job done, you have to book right there on the spot. Otherwise, we're so busy, we just don't have time. And, if you want to get on the schedule, you got to book, and you got to pay a 50% deposit or 20%, depending on the size of the job. And these were all little jobs in the beginning. When I say I did 250,000 my first year, I mean, that was probably 50 or 60 projects, maybe 70. It was a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, my average project was very small. I'd do a $100 job. I'd do a $500 job. And, when we did 1.2 million that first year, I mean, we did hundreds and hundreds of projects. It was just crazy. And then I realized big ticket, less volume, bigger ticket.
Light bulb.
Started building and developing and things like that. So that's kind of how that evolved. But it all started with an idea.
Yeah. And
then it started with the belief that I could do it. And it wasn't all of these, man, I can't do that. And somebody tell me, oh, you'll never do this. And, how am I going to do that? It was like, how can I make this happen? And I didn't sit there and worry about it. I just did it. I just went out and I knocked on doors and, called everybody I knew and said, hey, I got this company and I'm doing this. And I put an ad in the paper and put ads in the phone book. And then I, showed up and did what I said I was going to do.
There you go.